Welcome back from your break. My name is Colleen McGavin, and I'm the Patient Engagement Lead at the BC Support Unit, and I'm pleased to be your host for this morning's one-hour breakout session. You'll see that we're now using Zoom meetings, and apparently that does not include a Q&A feature. So at some point, the presenter may unmute everyone so that you can speak, but please feel free to use the chat to engage with our presenter as well. And remember that the chat can also be used to exchange email addresses for later follow-up. And if you want someone to send the list of resources that'll be mentioned in this presentation, feel free to enter your email in the chat as well. So let's get started. Can I pass the virtual microphone to our presenter, Nicholas Lloyd-Kuzik, to talk about amplifying and engaging with patient voice using recorded audio as a knowledge translation tool, podcasts, and beyond. Nicholas, please feel free to start.
Thanks so much, Colleen. And hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. I'm really pleased you're joining me today. I know this is kind of a niche topic, and I'm glad that someone's showing some interest because I think it's got a lot of potential, and I'll talk about it a lot, obviously, today. Let me just kind of get set up here. I'm going to get a couple more people joining us. That's great. Welcome to the newcomers. So I'm just going to get set up with sharing my screen so you can see what I'm seeing. And by the way, I have two screens set up here as well. So if I'm looking over to the corner here, I'm still engaging with you. I'm just not looking directly into your eyes digitally, as it were. Okay, so let's see here. Share screen. Got it? I'm going to make sure my audio is going to go to. Okay. So I hope you now see my slides. Is that what's going on? Okay. Perfect. So again, hi everyone, welcome to this workshop. Today we're going to be exploring recorded audio as a tool for engaging with patient voice and knowledge translation. And we're going to be covering a lot of ground. And really, this is intended to be kind of a high-level overview of what it can look like to take an idea, whether it's an idea or a piece of knowledge from research, practice, partnership, or anything else, and convert it into an idea for audio program and actually record that idea and then release your content out into the world and to be heard by the people who need to hear it. I know that sounds like a lot of work, but I think it's actually a lot more doable than most people realize. And I want to share some of the things that I've learned through producing a lot of these programs and make it easy and accessible for anyone else to do it too. So I propose this workshop, like I kind of said, because I believe that recorded audio is actually a significantly underused medium in health and research kind of more broadly, whether it's with storytelling, interviewing, or providing, even a plain language summary of research findings or an academic paper or something or anything in between. I think audio recordings can be really effective and from the production side, very affordable and achievable to use as a complement to other products like reports and things or websites or anything, or also as a standalone product. They can kind of be both, which I think is a great strength of the medium. Also, before we get started, I want to take a quick moment to acknowledge that the work that I do and the research and coordination work that the rest of our team at the Center for Rural Health Research does in our offices under normal circumstances takes place on and is supported by the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people at UBC Vancouver campus. And I'm grateful to be able to work and learn on such an incredibly beautiful and rich land. Now, with that being said, I'd like to also introduce myself. My name is Lloyd-Kuzik, and I'm a research analyst working on the Rural Evidence Review Project at part of the Center for Rural Health Research at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And my health background is actually in kinesiology originally, but I also hold a Master of Public Policy and Global Affairs from the University of British Columbia. And for years, I've been recording and producing music actually as a passion and hobby. And as part of that, I've been learning everything I possibly can about the capture, editing, and processing and publishing of sound. As you can tell by my big fancy mic, which I feel gives me some credibility in these kinds of sessions. So as you could probably imagine, this is also my podcasting and vocal and everything else mic. But you don't need to have fancy gear. That's one of the things I want to definitely highlight for this session. You do not need fancy gear to make good audio. It's totally accessible with the things you already have. So a couple of years ago, I was able to kind of join my involvement in sound with my involvement and interest in media and policy and health and social issues. First as a podcast producer with my Graduate Student Association media group, and most recently also my role at the Center for Rural Health Research at UBC, where I led the launch of a new podcast channel to help the center kind of share knowledge and engage with patient voices in a new way that we hadn't done before. And it's been a really interesting ride. And it's relatively new still, but I'll kind of, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'll tell you about that program in a little bit. But the project that I work on primarily in my research analyst role at the Center for Rural Health Research is the Rural Evidence Review Project. And it aims to gather priority health issues from people who live in rural places across British Columbia, convert those issues into research questions, and then conduct literature reviews. And that is to say, to find out what other work has been done across Canada and the world that might help to answer the question that we've been given from our patient partners and citizen patients, and then share what we learn right back to the people who asked us the question in the first place. In addition to also elevating the insights we've gathered to decision makers and health policymakers at the provincial level. So a really key part of the work that we do is to share all the insights and the knowledge that we gather in as many ways as we can, and to make it accessible and compelling and useful for people. And like I'm sure many of you watching at home can appreciate, the work that we do is fundamentally grounded in the citizen patient experiences and realities. And we take engagements with citizen patients very seriously. Sorry, going back to my slides here. But also before I want to go much further, I want to thank you sincerely to the BC Support Unit, without whose funding we couldn't do all the work that we do, and also who is funding today's conference and organizing today's conference. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's exciting to be here. So patient voice, starting with the most basic idea really at the core of all this. To us and all of you here, I'm sure the importance of patient voice in healthcare research and planning and delivery can't be overstated. But in research, so many of the tools we use to gather patient voice, whether that's surveys, for example, they capture thoughts, they capture experiences and opinions, but almost never capture a person's real voice, which to me is kind of ironic. And in my opinion, recorded audio, whether it includes voices or music or other sounds, or a combination of things, helps to add that color and character and humanity to the experiences that we as researchers are really hoping to learn from and to share with other people. Experiences that are, of course, fundamentally human, and that are, of course, in day-to-day life most often shared, in a person's voice from across the dinner table or whatever, rather than written in a report. And both are important, right? Not trying to de-emphasize the importance of written products, but I think it's important to acknowledge that there's something else that audio can also add to them. So it's complementary. So I think that audio can help us tell better stories, but what we learn and what we know, and whether you're a citizen, patient, or a provider, or a researcher, or anyone else, I think they can help be helpful tools. So today I'm going to go through kind of a whirlwind tour of what it might look like to record, edit, and share audio as a tool to engage with patient voice, and also amplify patient voices and conversations, and to share knowledge more generally. So these kind of principles, of course, can be used in health research context, but any other context really. So they're very transferable. And there are as many approaches to creating audio as there are reasons for doing it naturally. So the focus will be fairly broad when it comes to formats for programs and things like that. But I will actually be zeroing in on podcasts as a loosely defined kind of genre, because they are so flexible and they're generally familiar for people. So I think it's a useful way to discuss audio. What I hope you can ultimately take away from the presentation today is, one, that recorded audio can contribute to your work and impact. No matter what you do, I think it can contribute to your work and impact. Two, the technical skills to record and edit audio might be unfamiliar to you right now, and the programs to do that might be kind of unfamiliar and look a bit threatening. But I honestly believe that the basics are very simple and learnable by anybody. Just like anyone could learn to use Microsoft Word, it's kind of the same type of thing. And three, you probably have access to all the tools you need already to do this. And I'm going to show you what they are, or tell you what they are rather, and I'll do a quick demonstration, hopefully to demystify the process of working with audio a bit, so that you can kind of do it on your own. In a few minutes, we'll also go through an exercise to help think through and kind of plan for an audio recording session, because there are some kind of unique qualities of recording audio that you do want to consider when you're thinking about designing a program and formatting, setting, things like that. So we'll go through that, and also equipment and whatever. And again, to help you kind of avoid some of the pitfalls and mistakes that are really common and that I definitely made when I started, but they're easy to avoid. You don't need a lot of special gear to make fairly decent recording. So we'll get into that. Okay, so I'm going to move ahead here. Now, I think this should work pretty well tech-wise. I'm going to play you two very short clips that I made earlier. One is totally raw, unedited audio. I'm speaking into the microphone that I have now. And I made some deliberate kind of mistakes to emulate what it sounds like. When you're recording something live, there are always going to be stumbles or an ambulance passes or you cough or something like that. And to show you an after, which is when I edited the audio to remove those mistakes and added in some music. And you'll see it's the first one sounds kind of, raw. The second one sounds, I think, much more polished and professional. And I'll show you to get from point A to point B is actually very, very simple. Most people just aren't familiar with how to do that. So I'll play the first audio example. If you hear only silence, please raise your hand so I can adjust. I think it should be okay though. Hi, my name is Nicholas Lloyd-Kuzik, and you're listening to the Putting Patients First podcast. We've got an excellent program lined up for you today. Sorry about that. I'll just keep going. We're going to be taking a look at how we can... We're going to be taking a look at how we can create compelling audio products quickly, effectively, and with resources that are low or no cost, so that we can expand our toolkit for engaging with and amplifying patient voices in our roles as healthcare researchers, practitioners, and advocates. All right, so there's the before. So obviously not ideal with the big cough and some stutters or some awkward gaps. Here's after. This took me maybe 5 or 6 minutes. I'll actually do this for you live in a little bit, so I'll show you how it works. Hi, my name is Nicholas Lloyd-Kuzik, and you're listening to the Putting Patients First podcast. We've got an excellent program lined up for you today. We're going to be taking a look at how we can create compelling audio products quickly, effectively, and with resources that are low or no cost, so that we can expand our toolkit for engaging with and amplifying patient voices in our roles as healthcare researchers, practitioners, and advocates. Let's get started. So totally different, right? And it's not that hard to do. So I'll show you how to do that. Okay, switching back a bit. Now, when I say recorded audio, I'm being kind of deliberately vague. There are endless formats. Some of them are not so different from written works, like a verbatim reading of an article, which is more or less functions just to translate whatever is written to audio form. Like if you listen to certain newspapers, like The Economist, for example, they have broadcasters read out every single word of every issue, so people can listen to it on the bus or whatever. And that is, one form, or something a bit more specialized, like a podcast that blend together, multiple speakers, sounds, music, maybe have a more conversational tone, like how I'm speaking right now, which I think can be a useful tool for making things kind of more engaging and more human and accessible. Or you can also make things like 10 to 15-second teasers, kind of like what I just showed you, that actually maybe you're publishing a report if you're a researcher or something like that, or a new newsletter, or you're having you're organizing a new event for something. You can record something very short and you can put that on social media and things like that. It's just another way to reach out to people. It's almost like using, you would want to put like a poster or a flyer using big colors and, an interesting font and a picture. This is a different way to do that, but using sound. And it's not very difficult. I think I'll, ironically, pardon that horrible pun, but I'll sound like a broken record. It's talking about how not difficult it is, but hopefully you'll come across from that. It'll come across in what I show you. And also another great, I think that not to be de-emphasized, great format for audio is storytelling, someone actually being on a recording and telling a story about their experiences. And I'll point you to some examples of that in other existing podcasts and things. It's very powerful and not to be discounted at all just because they're not formal or not based on, some kind of report or something. Today, though, I think we're going to be we will be focusing more on podcasts, like I mentioned before, just because I think they're very flexible, and they can be kind of defined in any way you choose. There's really no strongly defined conventions around what a podcast is or isn't. And also, firstly, I want to say I personally don't really like the word podcast, and I think it's kind of taken on a bit of a buzzword status. And it's really just referring to any kind of spoken word audio recording for almost any purpose. But I do like it for a couple of reasons, because it's recognizable. People know kind of what that means. And also, if you have a podcast, you can consolidate your products into mainstream platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, which is really important for people to access your content. They can subscribe, they can automatically receive updates when you publish new content, things like that. And it's all, natively on people's phones or computers. So I think it's really important. But we'll get into kind of what that looks like a bit later. And also I have a resource guide that it will accompany this session. I think it might be made available on the description for this session that has some guides about what that looks like and how to do that and things. I think also podcasts are a very attractive and effective medium, especially for people who are not in the habit of reading what would otherwise be rather long written articles or reports to get the same information. I think sometimes people might be more likely to listen to another human being speak about it. And like I mentioned, they're easy to find, manage, and consume. They're kind of like existing programs and applications on phones and things like that that help people keep track of all this media in an easy to organize format, which really helps. And certainly they're a great way to get people to listen to your content or consume your content if they're driving, doing dishes, on the bus, things like that. I'm definitely one of those people. I do that way more than reading long articles, actually, besides when I'm working, because I review articles all day long, but outside of work. And also I say they're attractive. And you can see also on kind of the picture on the side, I think podcasts are attractive because they also contain cover art. There's a visual aspect as well. And I think that is kind of subtly compelling, and it seems cohesive, it seems professional. And there's also, the aspects of the human voice, I think makes things sound more natural. And I suspect, the natural quality of a human voice makes the listener maybe more receptive to the content that's being shared. Also, they can be designed to be complementary to other sources of information, reports, things like that, websites, like I've mentioned before, or standalone. For example, actually at the Center for Rural Health Research, one of the first programs we did was actually we interviewed a whole bunch of people from across rural remote communities in BC about their experiences in rural community resilience in response to COVID-19. So often rural places are painted with kind of a deficits brush as being smaller or less able to cope. But actually, I think in our research, we come across kind of the opposite more often than not, which is the tremendous resilience that occurs in rural communities. So we wanted to talk to people about that. We were talking directly with folks over Zoom, which is actually a great way to do interviews, and it is easy to record in. But at the same time, concurrently, our research center was doing other research about people's experiences with COVID-19 in rural BC. We weren't drawing on the same data, but they're thematically linked, and they're complementary. When we go and talk to whether they're partners or other patients in meetings and things like that, we can mention both of those pieces of work that we've done if people are curious to learn more or to offer their perspectives. And the last point here, they're relatively low competition. Yes, of course, there are lots and lots of podcasts out there. There are lots of talk radio programs and things like that too. But think about how many reports, websites, articles there are. There are 100 times more written articles and things like that than there are podcasts and audio pieces. So I think that if you're thinking about different organizations and research centers, because that's kind of my world, any research center's website will have reports and things like that, but very few actually have recorded audio products. And it will maybe help your research, your message, your voice to stand out a little bit more, and you can offer something a bit different. Okay, I kind of jumped ahead a little bit. Just a couple more notes about what podcast means in terms of conventions, because I think there's a lot of confusion around what that can mean. There are few conventions. I've listened to podcasts that are as short as 4 to 6 minutes per episode, or as long as 5 to 6 hours, which sounds kind of nuts, but they do exist, and they come in all genres and styles. Some kind of sound more like news, some are more like comedy or history or personal accounts or scientific discussions. Some are panel discussions, some are interviews, some are just storytelling with one voice. There's usually some kind of audio branding, which is what I meant by audio branding. I mean, having music and things as part of it, or sound effects, which I think is important. Think about it like if you're publishing a report or sharing a newsletter, you'll want to have some pictures, some graphics. It's the same kind of thing. You want to have some sort of decoration, but instead of decorating space on a report, you're decorating time with music on audio. And with in terms of release frequency, it's totally flexible. Many podcasts come out weekly, some come out quarterly, or just maybe short run mini series like we do. We kind of work on a cluster of 5 or 6 episodes and then publish them kind of when they're ready. So it's very flexible, really is the point. There's usually a consistent host, but not always. I've been the host lately, but we're certainly, looking to have other speakers as well. So you ask now that we have a bit of a clearer understanding of what that looks like, the podcast and things, how can they be applied to engaging and amplifying patient voices in conversations? I'm glad you asked. So I'll begin by sharing just quickly kind of our experience. And when I say our, I mean the Center for Rural Health Research and the Rural Evidence Review Project as well, and how we decided to use audio to do just that. So around the time COVID-19 hit in BC, we decided to launch a Center for Rural Health Research podcast channel. We wanted to create content that would help to share rural and remote patient community voices on healthcare issues in BC, to share the knowledge that we gather in the course of our work in a way that was easily accessible, compelling, and complementary to other efforts we had going on, and also to engage kind of a broad network of stakeholders in the rural health space in our content to help provide informative and well-rounded information. To do this, we envisioned creating a short run mini series of health related topics. So each kind of mini series of maybe 5 or 6 episodes, kind of depends, would be on different topics within this subject kind of rural health issues in BC. Our first mini series, as I mentioned, was on rural community resilience and adapting to life in COVID-19 world. And currently, actually coincidentally to the topic of this conference, we're also working on continuing development of a series exploring patient voice and engagement. And we have multiple project teams in our office who also have plans to get those teams to contribute and spearhead kind of the creation of other content related to their knowledge areas. And, when we meet someone in a meeting or we have someone in our broader network and, we're thinking about content and, current events and things like that, we'll often reach out to someone and say, hey, you know a lot about this. You've spoken about this in the past. Would you want to be interviewed for our program? And we get them on the program. And it's not just us speaking. It's actually always someone else as well. And right now, at least in terms of SoundCloud, which is one hosting platform, we have registered approximately 600 plays so far, and it's only been around for a couple months. So that's really nice. And the handful of episodes that we have, and hopefully we're going to be growing as well. So we also exist, and again, I'll kind of get into how to do this quickly at the end of a presentation. And also it's in the resource guide I've sent as well. This is what it looks like to have a podcast on Apple Podcasts. So we have, a little, I think I can actually have my nifty little pointer here. We have our little, our description of the programs, and you see the programs here. People can download or listen to individual things, and our little cover art and all that kind of stuff. And similarly on Spotify and a bunch of other platforms. A quick aside, how that actually works is we upload to one central, and this is kind of an important thing. We upload to one central host, which happens to be SoundCloud in this case. There are other ones as well. And by linking things like Spotify and Apple to that host, when I upload things to SoundCloud, it automatically goes to everywhere I've connected it to. So even though we maintain 3 or 4 different platforms, it's really only enough, like as much work as maintaining kind of one platform, more or less, which is I guess something that most people outside of this podcast space probably don't know. And it is an important point. So other quick examples, I did a little bit of a search of interesting podcasts, just so you can get an idea, if you wanted to go and have a look, of other examples of ways people are doing this in Canada in the health context, using patient voice in podcast. And a great one is the First Nations Health Authority podcast channel. And they cover various subjects and various speakers that are, kind of ad hoc. But they're great. They're very informative. In Plain Sight is actually published by Health Canada, and it's a series of personal stories from people affected by the opioid crisis. And it's really storytelling. That's the main thing. It's patient voices telling their own stories of their experience with the opioid crisis. And it's so powerful. And I think that this is a great example of kind of almost creative approaches to sharing critical information. It doesn't matter who your audience is. It could be a layperson, it could be a policymaker, it could be a researcher. Storytelling is, I think, powerful to any audience. Sick Boy is another interesting one, very provocatively named. from CBC, which is a panel. I think that the host of the panel, or the moderator, sorry, actually has cystic fibrosis, and he explores lived experiences of people who have other chronic diseases and destigmatizing and demystifying what that looks like for people. So it's a mixture of panel and storytelling. White Coat, Black Art is another kind of well-known CBC podcast. It's a physician's perspective, actually. It's more journalistic, but also storytelling in there. So when I think the point I'm trying to make in offering these examples is there are many different formats, and they're a combination of kind of different genres sometimes, whether they're journalistic or formal or panel or storytelling or interview. And it's a very flexible medium for that sort of thing. And I think it's very personal, can feel very personal and very intimate. Also, there's a more formal example of like the CMAJ, which is the Canadian Medical Association Journal podcast, and also Nature, like the journal Nature has a podcast and other journals. So it really is a format that can be used for kind of many different types of purposes. Okay, so let's quickly get into what planning a podcast can look like. There's more to it than what I'm going to describe, of course, or there can be more to it because it's a very flexible medium. But here are a few questions that I've felt have been really helpful in focusing efforts to prepare a podcast or just recorded audio content. And we'll get a chance to kind of apply these in just a minute. So first of all, there has to be a really, and this sounds kind of common sense, but I feel like it's important because I've had to relearn these lessons in a different way with audio. There has to be a very clear idea of your objective for creating an episode, or something specific or idea or perspective you want to share. And it's important to make these really clear, not just when planning, but also in your recorded introduction or any podcast description or episode descriptions. Because unlike written things, people can't really scan through audio as quickly to figure out if there's something in there that's interesting for them. They have to be able to know kind of in the first couple of seconds whether this is relevant to their interests. So I think it's very important at the very beginning, almost like a headline, sub-headline, abstract, just to kind of say right up front what's going to happen. That's a really, really important in this format. Also for planning, naturally. Secondly, we need to consider who we want to share these ideas with the most, whether it's a general population or health service providers or other patient advocates or whoever it is. And this, because that really informs the whole process of distribution, not just your format and everything, but distribution as well. And then, of course, related to all of the points, what's the best format? I think at this point, you've probably heard me talk about a number of formats and realize that there's a huge amount of flexibility, and that might really impact your audience, and your main idea might really impact how you want to do that. So I think it's important to be explicit about what's the best format for your message, whether it's a panel or interview or just a narrated kind of piece you're reading from paper. And it also drastically, of course, affects how you're planning, who you're reaching out to, and things like that. And that leads into the next point of whose help is needed. I think it's a little bit different than, preparing a report and things like that, of course. It's almost like you're preparing for a panel if you've ever been the moderator for a panel at a conference or something like that. I think reaching out for people well in advance, sending them the information they need to perform, setting the questions ahead of time is really, really important. It reduces the editing burden. If people all know kind of what's going to happen, it reduces pauses and things like that. So it's extra important in terms of recorded audio to reach out to people early if you need help and or need like partnership in creating the content. And then, of course, putting this all into a session outline plan to work with your colleagues. And some of this, I'm sure, sounds like common sense. But I think if for people, especially if you're working with a new medium like audio, it can be kind of daunting to plan. And so I think that if you focus on these things, it should really help get a long way down the road of planning an effective session that runs well and not losing track of your thoughts and being surprised at the last moment. So I'd actually like to take a couple of minutes here and have you do a bit of thinking and potentially writing on a piece of note paper you have ahead or in front of you. The following kind of cues. Take an idea. It doesn't have to be, this is kind of a strangely worded prompt now that I look at it. It doesn't have to be the most important idea. Take an idea or a concept that you think are important to you and worth sharing, worth talking about, worth exploring. It can be one or two related ideas or different ideas. It's up to you. And then write down the people, it doesn't have to be one particular audience, but the people that you think you'd like this to be heard by the most, or like to engage with this idea the most. And try not to make it too broad. I mean, obviously we'd like everyone to understand why these things are important and things like that, but try to make it kind of medium in terms of specificity. So rather than saying everybody, I'll say, I really want patients to understand this, and I really want healthcare planners to understand this, or something like that. And then think about the tone, whether it needs to be formal or conversational or journalistic and things like that. And start planning out maybe a couple of your ideas of how you might want to format that session, format that product. Whether again it's be panel or solo or interview. How long is it going to be? Is it going to be a 3-minute thing? You just want to flag an idea? Is it going to be a 45-minute in-depth journalistic piece? Like, what makes sense for you? And if you do that really quickly, maybe take the same topic and totally change the, like, what's an alternative format you could use for a different audience, maybe, or maybe try a different topic. And then I think so. We'll take a couple minutes, and then I will break us up into breakout rooms for just a couple minutes as well, and we can kind of exchange our ideas about what our topics were and why we designed things the way that we did. So we'll just take a couple minutes right now. You can go ahead. I'll stop talking, and you can go ahead and have a little think about that. Okay, so I think probably most of you have put down an idea or two at this point. I don't know if we actually have enough people to do to warrant doing breakout rooms, so maybe we'll just kind of make it an open discussion. I think, are people able to unmute themselves right now? Or is it an option for you? Are people able to share their voices? Okay, great. So I guess I'll ask, would anyone like to just quickly, volunteer to share, give a quick summary of what they were thinking about in terms of their important idea, and also the decisions they made around formatting and things like that, how you're planning it? Yeah, by all means, go ahead.
Thanks. This was a really insightful exercise. I think for me, the most, I tried to challenge myself here to think about how you could create a podcast about a concept which is much more visual.
Mm.
So yesterday I was in a conference and the presenter was talking about journey mapping. And we basically heard the story of a patient who had kidney disease, and how he went through a series of different challenges along his journey, right? So from his diagnosis to then having this wonderful team that cared for him as he did peritoneal dialysis at home. And then that failed and he had to go into in-center, the anxiety that caused him, how difficult it was to meet with a new team. There was a lot of uncertainty, and then moving on to, learning how to do home hemodialysis. So it was a really interesting journey, and it was framed from the concept of looking at the user's experience of the healthcare system and where you have make some changes. So it was really interesting because you could visually see it on screen, what his journey looked like. But it would be wonderful to use a podcast in a similar way to tell the same story. But perhaps, again, the most important idea is that as you go through these transitions, there are ways we can support the patient. You want to share this idea with other patients who are probably going through the same experience, but also the healthcare providers and the decision makers, because these are opportunities for solutions. The tone of the recording, again, I think the story and hearing the voice of the patient is so powerful. So I want that to shine. But I certainly see a type of a facilitator or somebody to guide the patient and ask these insightful questions along the way. So that's what I think the format would look like. I don't know if that helps.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. And what comes to mind, I think that, I can kind of recall, I don't have any specific examples. I think like similar types of formats to what you're talking about, of a kind of, it's almost like a journalistic kind of facilitated storytelling. So there's a moderator or a host who helps to kind of stand in as the listener and talking to a person, in this case, a patient. And I think also in terms of recorded audio, there's a tremendous capacity to kind of decorate storytelling with maybe field recordings from certain places, from clinics or wherever the places people are inhabiting in the story. It's very easy to put those into the recording as well. And I think it adds this certain sense of realness and kind of authenticity and real experience, and helps the listener feel the story as well. So I think it's a really powerful concept you have there for sure. Would anyone else like to share their ideas? Yes.
I was thinking something as simple as a PSA, public service announcement, might be considered a mini podcast. The idea I had initially was the Patient Voices Network might want to produce something to recruit new volunteers. And an aside, I wanted to point out the British Columbia Emergency Medicine Network is really using podcasts to invite their audience to realize that health practitioners are human beings at the end of shift. I think they're doing a remarkably good job of it. The talent, the layers of audio, music, and those things, I think can be used effectively in a PSA. Sometimes it's good to take a small project, even if it's just for practice, and fine tune it. The other thing I wanted to say is the PSA, for instance, might be 3 different episodes to keep the audience interested. And you mentioned the value of a musical line in the background. I think it lights people up. Hey, I know that song. That's why music is used so often in commercial advertising.
Absolutely. I think you've touched on an incredible point. And I don't mean with this presentation to say that everything has to be a podcast or podcasts are all we can do. Certainly PSAs, advertisements, they're just, audio can be used as a tool, as a different medium to achieve a lot of the similar types of things that people would normally deploy written things for in a different way. Or whether it's, you can put out ads on a local radio station, maybe in that case, right? Like it's a possibility. And it can be just a complementary effort to achieve something you want to achieve. So I think it's a perfect example. Teasers, trailers, PSAs, calls for action, calls for recruitment or whatever. Absolutely possible to do that using audio. Totally. I think we have time maybe for one more person's idea or contribution, or any other questions or comments people want to add in. Sorry, I don't see names. I wish I could see names. Okay, how about we do both? The two people who raised their hand can both say something. Just keep in mind, we have a couple more things to go through.
So I'm Deborah Sheets, and I'm working on a podcast right now. We're going to provide caregivers of people with dementia with a recorder. And what we want to do, we're hoping to get them to record some of their lived experience and then to put it together into a 10-minute long podcast. But we're hoping we'll get some very some gold nuggets that will provide insights into what it's like to live well with dementia. What are the things that are important? And I'm, you just are kind of hoping you're going to get these things you can edit down, but I'm trying to figure out everything I can to make sure that we get some gold in the midst of what's going to be a lot of recording material, no doubt.
Absolutely.
But we hope to have at least a series of 4, and each will be about 10 minutes long.
That's a really fabulous idea. I think that's interesting. We don't have a lot of time right now, but I would, if you want to connect about, I can offer you whatever experience and things I have and skills I have. I'd be very happy to connect with you over email or have another Zoom call or anything like that. We can talk.
Thank you.
Same goes for anybody. I mean, there's obviously so much more to unpack and explore in terms of particular challenges or editing or whatever else. And we can only afford to do just a little bit of all of it today. But I'm happy to chat with anyone. And there was one more person who wanted to offer a thought.
Sure. Hi, I'm Donna Solomon. The thought that I was hoping to explore was the idea of looking at obesity stigma in the medical profession. We know that about 75% of caregivers have stigmatizing views and attitudes towards people with obesity. And so it's something that's very important to address. So for that, I would focus on sharing with health professionals to try and challenge the stigmatizing views. The tone would probably be a combination of casual and academic because you need a bit of both. And I would do it as a series. So the series would have to have some academic content, but at the same time, you want patient experiences. You want those lived voices. You want interviews and panel discussions. You want it to be interactive as well to try and challenge those stereotypes and the disbelief that people don't necessarily believe you when you tell them the facts about the disease.
Absolutely. I think you touched on a number of really important points in terms of using audio as a medium to communicate a point. Naturally, you can use kind of a format salad over the course of a series, right? It's totally up to you to figure out what suits the kind of key message, the idea, the feeling, the whatever. And I think that's actually one of the big strengths for sure, and something that people shouldn't shy away from, is using a whole combination of different strategies, whether a lot of music or a little bit of music or multiple voices or one voices or field recordings or studio recordings or whatever. And it's all very flexible. Thank you so much for your contributions. I wish we could talk for much longer about this, but there are a couple more things I want to cover. I'm already going to have to be a little bit lean with how we spend the next about 15 minutes or so. But I do encourage anyone, again, to reach out to me or to also interject with any particular questions they have. And I'll do my best to address them. Over the next couple minutes, I want to show just quickly what it looks like to edit audio on a basic level. I think that I'm really confident that with the tools that I show you, again, kind of in an overview sense, you can do 85, 90% of all the types of editing you'll need to do for audio, really. I'll quickly discuss also kind of the ideal setting and a couple of different tools you have around the house probably, or the office or whatever, that you could use to do this. I might have to kind of go off script from my slides a little bit, but that's okay. So we're going to go from idea to episode right now. So in terms of recording setting, you don't have to be in a studio. Obviously, if you can, then great, no problem, that's great. But I think the most important thing really is to think about having a room with as little outside noise, obviously, as possible, but also hopefully one with not very much reverb would be ideal. These are not rules, but this is just a general practice. If you can, go somewhere with maybe more furniture, drapes, carpets, things like that, because audio reverb, if you clap and you can hear it kind of echoing and reverberating, it shows up a lot on recordings, and things can sound much clearer and people can understand you more if there's a little bit less of that. So that's one important thing for intelligibility. And another way to do that is actually to hold microphones closer to your mouth rather than far away. Not on your mouth, because that can cause its own problems and it's really distorted and stuff, but close to your mouth. And actually, interestingly, one microphone that almost everyone has that's actually pretty good quality is the microphone on your phone. If you can use your voice recorder in your phone even, and I kind of joke, you can actually even just do this. If you want to like record something, you could do that. It's not a terrible solution. You could do better, but it's not bad. You can also hold it like this, and use like the voice memos in your phone, and then you can send that file to your computer. It's actually pretty good. I actually tried a number of different microphones. I mean, obviously I tend to use this one when I'm doing something, but you don't have to. I've tried phones, I've tried different headsets, I've tried laptops and things. I did a kind of a shootout, it's called. So you try that, same kind of recording voice, but you try different microphones and see which one you like the best. I think the phone actually won out for me. So that's something that's totally doable. And I've definitely seen published podcasts that use things like a phone, obviously, to do field recording or whatever. So that's totally possible. You need some software to record into. I recommend Audacity. It works on both Mac and PC. There's a link to it in the resource guide. I use a program called Logic, but Audacity is free. And there are other ones as well that you can use for sure. And I can send you out those resource guides. You don't have to like make all the notes of every name. There is also help with editing if you need it. There are freelance services on a website called Fiverr, for example. People offer podcast editing services and podcast production. And I've seen them for as low as like $5 or $7 per half hour of content. So it's very affordable. But also I think I'm honestly confident that you could do it yourself too if you wanted to, but it's a good time saver thing. Or if you just get confused and don't want to do it, that's also fine. So I'm going to go into editing in our last 10 minutes or so, and I'm going to be a little bit fast, but I hope I can show you what this looks like. So I'm going to show how I got from the first audio clip that I showed you to the second audio clip that I showed you. So I'm going to new share. I'm going to share this desktop. Now everyone should see my desktop, I hope. I can't see you anymore, which is a little disconcerting, but I guess we'll have to just deal with it. Or can I? Okay. Where is Zoom? I have way too many icons here. That's okay, whatever. I'll just show you. Actually, is the tech person on? I would like to be able to see if people have questions. I can't see people right now for some reason.
Nick, it's Jude. I'm happy to keep an eye on the chat box and let you know. If
Thanks, Jude. Okay, no problem. So again, bear with me. We're going to go a little quickly, but I think it's important that everyone sees this to kind of demystify the process a little bit. So I have Audacity installed on my computer, which again is that free program I mentioned for editing software. And what I did earlier is I recorded just raw audio using the microphone that I'm using right now. And I put it into Audacity. So I opened up Audacity like this, which is actually on a different screen right now. Hold on, I'll bring this over. So this is what it looks like. So there are a lot of buttons and things, but again, I think if you think about this kind of as analogous to a word processor, in that you can actually achieve 90% of what you want to do on a word processor with just like typing things in and not using many buttons or the toolbar at all. It's the same kind of thing with this. Most of the functions you need are pretty intuitive and they're pretty basic. Even this cursor that I have right now is very similar to a word processor and it's used in the same way. So this is the sentence that I recorded. So I'll play this for you again right now. Hi, my name is Lloyd-Kuzik. You're listening to the Good Patients First podcast. You've got an excellent program.
We can't hear it.
You can't hear it.
It's really,
Is it really quiet, you say?
yeah, it's really soft.
Okay, this is what I was worried about. We were trying to fix this earlier.
You need to share your computer audio as well. It's not
Yeah,
just share screen, it's share audio.
I have that selected. So I'm not sure why it's doing that. Here, how about this? I'll just put my microphone up to it and you can hear. Hi, my name is Nicholas Lloyd-Kuzik, and you're listening to the Putting Patients First podcast. We've got an excellent... You hear that?
Yep.
Great. So that's what we're working with. So you remember from the intro, I coughed and stuttered deliberately, right? So that's where this comes in here. And up for you today. Sorry about that. Right. So very loud and obnoxious. We don't want that. So we can click around and see where that is, and then also kind of see it here. It's kind of like a word processor. Think of it as a sentence. I can highlight the words I don't want, and all I got to do is press backspace, and it's gone. So we're going to be taking a look at. You've got an excellent program lined up for you today. We're going to be taking a look at, and you would never know it was there. So that's really easy. It's all you have to do. So the other aspect that I added to this recording was music, and I think it's really important. So I'll show you very quickly what that can look like, because I think people can get intimidated by this. There are lots of resources to get Creative Commons music, meaning music you can use without, paying for it or anything like that in your project. One resource is actually YouTube, but not like searching in YouTube. But there's a part of YouTube called YouTube Studio for people who create content, and they have an audio library there. I'll show you what that is. I pulled it up already. So all you need to do is just type into Google YouTube audio library, and it will come up. You need to have a YouTube account, which is free. And you can see all of the different songs here. All this is music. And you can search, this is what comes up. And this is probably not going to be the right music for what I want. Right? It's probably not, but I want something more newscasty, maybe more inspirational. So what I'll do, I'll type inspirational in, and I've actually already clicked around these a couple of times. But you can see what works for you. Something that's, bright, cinematic. What I actually figured out is this one works for me really well. So I think you might recognize this from what I played earlier. That works for me. So I'm going to download that, and I'll just open my Audacity again, and all you have to do to add music is very simple. So this is the song I just downloaded. It's in my downloads folder. Just drag and drop. So as you can tell right now, the song is much longer than the rest of my audio. And again, back to our word processor analogy, all I need to do is kind of just highlight what I don't want and press delete, and that's fine. So one other thing we need to do before we're kind of done with this file is see how the audio from my speaking, which is up here, matches together with the music, and maybe it's too quiet or things like that. So I'll just play them both together right now. Sorry, it means I can just move it like this. So I'll play them together, and you'll see right now that there are some issues, but easy to fix. Hi, my name is Nicholas Lloyd-Kuzik, and you're listening to the Putting Patients First podcast. We've got an excellent program lined up for you. So you can see it's too loud. I can't hear my voice. And one thing I like to do, this is just kind of a stylistic thing, is have the narrator introduce themselves, have the music come in, and then fade to the background while the narrator introduces the rest of the program. So what I can do right now is I can split these things. And again, I apologize, I'm going a bit quickly, but all this, I've linked to tutorials in the resource guide I've sent, so you can see how to do this all for yourself as well. I just want to show you kind of what it looks like. So now I have my first introduction and then the content introduction, but the music's still too loud. So there's another tool here, and this is a standard tool you'll see in any kind of audio editing software that allows me to take the audio levels, as in the volume, and change how they work over time. So what I'll do is I'll have the intro music come in nice and loud, and then I will put the music right in the background so it's under what I'm speaking. And what I like to do at the end also is to bring the music back up and then have it fade out when the program is kind of done, or when we go into the main body of the program. So now I've done that, I can show you what this sounds like, and it's exactly what I played for you at the very beginning. Hi, my name is Nicholas Lloyd-Kuzik, and you're listening to the Putting Patients First podcast. You've got an excellent program lined up for you today. We're going to be taking a look at how we can create compelling audio product. And there we go. We have audio we can hear that has music in the background. And all I need to do now, if I wanted to export this, is export it as MP3. And there you go. And it'll come up on your desktop like this. And you can upload that to whatever platform you want. So I'm going to go back to my slides if I can. Do you see my slides? Great. Okay.
Yeah.
So apologies for that totally whirlwind tour, but I do think it's important just to show what that can look like. And I know I did it quite quickly, but actually, as an interesting point, that was one of my first times using Audacity. I used a different program and it didn't take me very long to figure out what tools do what. So I'm totally confident that you can do it too. And again, I've linked, there are lots of tutorials. This is a very widely used program. It's been around for a long time. Lots of tutorials to do how whatever you want to do. Also, if you want to have a call with someone on Zoom and record their audio for the program, that's also really easy to do. I won't do that today, but you can do that very easily. I do it all the time. So we only have a couple minutes left. And I don't think I have that many slides left, actually. I will mention just quickly about publishing again, and I'll kind of defer to my resource list that I'll send out as well, which can be, if you want to send your emails into the chat, that's one way to do it. We can email you a copy. And again, I think Tech was going to put it in the session description as well. If you go back to the main kind of conference page, I think it might be there. But platforms do matter, and it's very easy. If you want to get your audio content onto something like Apple Podcasts or Google Play or Spotify, it can do it for free, and you can do it fairly easily. There are guides. You have to upload your content onto like a central kind of host. Like I said, like SoundCloud's one of them. I have a list of a couple of them in the resource page. And then you connect Apple and Spotify and whatever else to that central host. So you're dealing with one kind of middle platform, and they upload your other things. So you don't have to worry about uploading it to everything yourself manually. And I think this is really important because this is how people tend to consume their audio media. So if it's on a familiar platform, a person can go on to Apple and just click subscribe. I want to get new info, new episodes when they come out, things like that. So it's really nice. It takes some of the work out of your hands in terms of getting people updated. You don't have to worry about email lists and newsletters. You can use those things, of course, but you don't have to rely on them for having people have new content. And I've come down to the very last second, but I really hope that through the course of this workshop, you've kind of gotten a better idea of what it can look like to use audio to engage patient voices, or for any purpose really, whether they're standalone content or complementary to other reports you're working on, or you want to make a PSA like John said, and you want to put it on the radio or something like that, or share on social media. These are totally attainable with free tools, and they don't have to take a huge amount of effort. There's a lot of support online. If you have any questions about how to do XYZ, how to edit this way, or how to put on this platform, or how to do whatever, there's so much content online. I'm all self-taught. I just did it from online, and I'm sure any questions you have can do that too. That being said, I'm also at your disposal. If you have any questions and you want to start up a new program or something like that yourself, I am obviously a very keen person in terms of helping. And I know I'm out of time. Colleen's giving me the wave. But that's all I wanted to say. So thank you so much for your attention and your contributions. And my contact info is here if you want to email me.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but I want to give a sincere thank you to Nick for contributing to putting Patient First 20 today. Nick, I personally really liked the discussion during the exercise, and you made creating a podcast with sound, music, everything look really, really easy. Just a reminder that the poster session starts now, so be sure to check that out. And we'll reconvene at 1 o'clock in our plenary session. So bye, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.